Hello and welcome to Cinema Eclectica, part of the Geek Show podcast network. We are the Geek Show's dedicated movie podcast. I'm Graham, and this week I've been joined by Mark.
Hello.
And Tim.
Hello.
And this week it's a very exciting thing, which we're doing for reasons that have nothing to do with shameless pandering, although it does help us achieve our quota of that. It's our Bong Joon-Ho special.
Hooray.
Yes.
Our Bong Joon-Ho, very, very special.
Yes.
He's lovely.
Yes, the tussle-haired world cinema dreamboat. I didn't want that sentence to go in that direction when I started it, but it just happened. Found his place in the world's hearts when he won, let me just check, every single Oscar up to and including Best Supporting Actress earlier this year.
Yeah.
But we are looking at three of his earlier films. And we're starting off with something that is going to be finally made available in the UK at the end of this month through Lionsgate Home Video. It's Snowpiercer, which I think we have mentioned on the show before, but only in the context of Rob going, why the hell is there not a UK release of Snowpiercer yet?
Yeah, it's ridiculous that it's taken as long as it has, but it's reasons we'll get into, but it's just thrilling to finally see it. Like it dropped on Netflix first with absolutely no warning, and all of a sudden everyone kind of went, wait, what? No, it's on Netflix. It's on Netflix. Everyone go watch it. It had a premiere on Film 4 a few months ago, and now finally, home release. So the home release it deserves.
It's been dropped on Netflix with no warning, or to put it another way, Netflix's most extensive publicity campaign to date.
Yeah. I'm sure we must have referred to Snowpiercer loads of times over the last few years, right?
It's become probably the most widely seen unreleased film in Britain.
Yeah, it's fair to say.
Yeah. This is the one which takes place in the aftermath of a failed geoseeding experiment to reverse global warming, which you'd have to say is, if anything, over-succeeded.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. You could tentatively call it a success in the context of that film,
Yeah.
Within whatever the boundaries of success and failure for that project were, if anyone, survived it in the context of the movie. Which we know that about 25 people did.
Yes.
No, a bit more than that, actually.
Yeah, the survivors are crammed on a train, the Snowpiercer of the title, which is built to withstand extreme ice age conditions. And over the generations, the passengers of the train have developed a sort of weird Ballardian class structure, including the worship of a reclusive transportation magnate called Wilford, who purportedly gave them this miraculous machine.
Yeah, all of which is kind of true, but sort of mythologized. I mean, it's not actually set that far in the future, is it? It's set, 20 years in the future?
It's set in 2031. The experiment that causes this to happen actually happened in 2014.
Oh, right, okay. So because the movie only came out in 2012 or later.
2013, apparently, yeah.
Right.
It didn't get much of a release, but I think such as it was, it came out in South Korea at least 2013. But outside, I've got, as far as I can see, there was a New York premiere 29th of July 2013, but that's about it.
So basically, in the context that it was meant to be released in, which isn't the context that it was actually released in, as we've said, this was meant to be something where the inciting incident of this alternate universe is happening right now as you watch.
So we're partially, therefore, unlike with a lot of sci-fi, we're sort of still in the phase of it not having come true, but not having been proven false. The first bit of it hasn't happened.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, it doesn't fall into either of those camps, does it?
Not quite, yeah.
But in terms of the film itself, I mean, where did we all first watch it? Tim, I'm pretty sure I first saw this over at your house once.
Possibly you did, and that's probably when I first saw it as well. I don't remember.
I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember, but I think it was around about. It was close to Christmas. Weirdly, I remember Christmas decorations being up, which is sort of appropriate. This is a New Year scene in it, so I guess it's the season.
Yeah.
It's not hardly like a big happy-go-lucky Christmas film, but
it's
maybe...
definitely a white Christmas. It's got that going for it.
Yeah, there's there's a New Year scene. On the other hand, it's not. By the standards of scenes that films that snowy, it's not a super Christmassy film, really, is it?
No.
It's hard to think of any other characteristic of Christmas that it could possibly have less.
Yeah, as New Year's scenes go, it's not the end of When Harry Met Sally. It's fair to say.
But yeah, this has an absolutely astonishing cast too. It's got Chris Evans, Tilda Swinton, Song Kang-ho, Ed Harris, John Hurt, Jamie Bell, Octavia Spencer. My personal pick out of the cast is Alison Pill's terrifying nursery teacher.
Yeah,
Hmm.
but
I think everyone will have their own favourites among these.
Yeah, she does a lot with very little screen time. Alison Pill.
Completely. Yeah.
But it's got an incredible cast, and like you, to kind of finish explaining the plot, you sort of, they form this bizarre class structure within the train, having spent 20 years on board the train. And really, it's an amazingly elaborate premise, given that this is then the story of disrupting that. This is the story of the revolution that takes place on board the train, where people in third class at the back of the train try and get to the front of the train in order to take over the engine.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a deceptively simple plot, and like the stuff that's unique about it makes it feel like a one-off is kind of all of the detail around it, really. Like, what goes on in those characters as you move forward. You have a fairly literal straight line forward, but it's anything but a straightforward film.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's a fair point. It's not linear.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, for one thing, like, just from the casting of Chris Evans down, is that you've got Captain America as the lead, normally the lead actor of the film leading this revolution, and he's not done as an all-American type character at all. It's a very different role to the type of stuff that we've seen him play for the last 10 years or so in his biggest role. It's very different, Bong Joon-Ho has spoken about casting him as the caricature of the all-American all-muscle and having to hide his stature because he's supposed to have been eating protein blocks for 17 years in the poor tail section of a train. And it gives him more of an acting, more character stuff to chew on, I think, as well as it goes on.
I think it uses that kind of unshakable decency that Marvel have found in Chris Evans reasonably well. It just complicates it as well. I mean, without spoiling anything, there is a speech right at the end of the film, which it is quite hard to imagine Steve Rogers giving.
Yeah, there's a specific line that often finds its way onto a meme, like someone just takes that screen cap and then it's just a reaction shot of someone from a Marvel film just looking like, what? I think you know the line I mean as well, but I'm not gonna spoil it here if people haven't seen it yet.
Yes. I think watching it again now, there are several things which make it worth waiting for and worth revisiting. I mean, the fact that you've got John Hurt in there, and I still miss John Hurt so much. Yeah. John Hurt playing a character called Gilliam too, and this would have been around the time that Terry Gilliam was trying to make The Man Who Killed Don Quixote with John Hurt as Don Quixote.
Right. Yeah, it's weird that. And is that name Gilliam also hinting at other connections to strange Gilliam-esque kind of movies? Like,
there is a definite kind of Brazil quality to the film, isn't there? Yeah.
And I don't know what else you could say this resembles. It kind of maybe resembles a slightly rough around the edges kind of dystopia. It also resembles, like you said, J.G. Ballard and High Rise a bit, but sideways instead of up and down.
Yes.
But on the other hand, it's also much more of a kind of like violent thriller kind of movie.
It is. Do we think it's probably Bong's most violent movie? I feel like it could be.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say so, just for consistency of this pretty much action going on after a point all the way through it.
Yeah, I mean, on the other hand, well, I'll get onto the host later on, but it's the host does have a spectacular amount of kind of violence in it. A lot of people get pointlessly beaten up and chewed up in the host. Yeah.
It has some memorably grisly images, one of which has recently achieved retroactive fame. It's the one of a group of assassins blooding their weapons by dipping them in the blood of a fish, which
What was the particular thing that brought that back into attention the other day?
There was a particular anecdote about that because this was produced by the Weinstein Company, and indeed part of the reason why it's suddenly become more available is that Harvey Weinstein had a lot of conflicts with Bong Joon-Ho about the final cut and ended up sort of burying the film in many territories out of spite. But he's recently become a bit less powerful in Hollywood. I can't remember why it was. I think it was the delayed release of Tulip Fever really did for him.
Don't know how you come back from that.
Yeah.
But
that fish thing, I don't. Mark, do you want to take this away? The fish story,
isn't it? It's along the lines of that scene. Was one of the many things that Weinstein felt didn't need to be in there, should be cut. And director Bong came out and said, well, that scene is a tribute to my father. My father was a fisherman. To which Weinstein immediately backed down and said, family's very important, keep it in. And director Bong has since released, this was an absolute lie.
Yeah.
It wasn't his exact words. He said it's a flipping lie. He just got tired of fighting the battles and felt that was an easy way to win.
Yeah.
I think I said this when we reviewed Parasite, though, but, just look at what 5 years, look at what the last few years without Weinstein, having this kind of power has done. You end up with Bong Joon-Ho, best director at the Oscars. Yes. Thank you very much. So, I do love that fish story, though. I was waiting to get around to that one.
Yeah. It's such a great story. And I think a few years have added perspectives to other elements of the film too. I mean, Bong claimed that when the guards beat Octavia Spencer, he was actually trying to stage that a bit like the Rodney King videotape. And you think, well, now you wouldn't really need to go back to Rodney King for that reference point, but he was shooting this in 2012 before Black Lives Matter was even a thing. I also think every time I see Tilda Swinton come on with that absolutely mad speech on how we should all be like the shoe.
Yeah.
I just think, did Bong Joon-Ho get an advance copy of Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life and just copy this out of it or something? It's unbelievably Petersonian nonsense, I think.
Yeah. I think it's where he's got a preview screening of some daily briefings to come.
Tilda Swinton is magnificent in this as a kind of completely...
Yeah, extraordinary.
Mad kind of Prime Minister Thatcher sort of character for working for the people enforcing the law of the front of the train on all of the people at the back. Enforcing it in the most completely bizarre ways. I mean, that was kind of what I was going to say about the violence. Yeah, it's a very, very violent movie, but on the other hand, in quite a kind of generally sort of fantasy setting, in a strange kind of context. And also a lot of the violence is very, very surreal kind of stuff. Like the one I was thinking of was the guy whose punishment is to forfeit an arm.
Yes.
And the way they do that is they open a hatch in the side of the train and he sticks his arm out into the freezing wasteland. And his arm gets frozen because it's so staggeringly cold outside the train. And then the guy pulls his frozen arm back inside and they shatter his arm off with a sledgehammer.
Yes, that's very early on in the film, and it gives the whole film a kind of attitude, doesn't it? It immediately says, look, this is a film where this sort of thing happens.
Yeah. And there is then a lot more of that kind of stuff.
Yes.
It's quite a kind of, I don't know, you say kind of allegorical thing, really, which is that obviously as they ascend through the train, they go through every sort of tier of society. They go through every class and every kind of sort of subculture of people.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to say, you said it's got an amazing cast. It's got Ed Harris in it as the engineer at the front of the train, who basically is kind of in the role of God, near enough in this society.
Essentially, really the same role that he had in The Truman Show, which is quite cute.
Yeah, and obviously he's the type of actor who gets cast as he's the controller, in a lot of things.
Yeah.
For this reason. I think I'm right in saying he was basically kind of uncredited.
Yeah, I don't know whether it was quite that far, but I remember when it started to come out in other territories, definitely there wasn't as much of a focus on him.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it seemed like to me he's such a big hitter, and he was either omitted from the credits in some jurisdictions, or at the very least they just weren't kind of promoting the movie based on him starring in it for some reason. I don't know.
It's got that energy, hasn't it? Of the if you'd leave them out all the trailers and then someone turns up. One of the things I found out reading around this for this podcast, Dustin Hoffman was considered for the role, for instance. So it does strike me as the sort of, that energy of like a character who turns up after all this build up. It's I do love the way Harris plays it because it's sort of mundane, but there's so much depth there to him. I mean, he's very mundanely played, but it absolutely lives up to all of the hype as well. It is done to subvert that expectation, but as soon as like for the duration of that scene, he's absolutely riveting. Again, he does loads. The cast being what it is such an opportunity, just such opportunities to do amazing stuff with so little screen time, really.
Yeah, I was going to say the only other thing is obviously he plays a character who only appears in like the last act of the movie. Really, he gets foreshadowed all the way through. Very kind of heavily, is very significant, but you only actually see him pretty much towards the end. So
yeah. And I think it's what Harris brings to that kind of role. You can look at his role in Yet the Truman Show, or you can look at his role in Walker, the incredibly insane Alex Cox film, and he brings a certain level of relaxedness to these roles where he plays incredibly powerful people. I mean, as you say, Mark, the first choice was Dustin Hoffman. The first choice for Harris's role in The Truman Show, I think, was Dennis Hopper, which would have been a radically different thing, wouldn't it? He'd have been more of a mad scientist type. But Harris is the sort of person who you can believe in this as well, would build a whole world and feel pretty content with it. The pressures of being a god, the crown that is heavy on the head, would not be a concern of his.
They'd probably make it a good double bill with The Truman Show where he's playing a similar sort of character.
Yeah,
you get Harris a lot of the time as the mission controller of NASA. Frequent recurring role of Ed Harris for that. He was in that in Gravity. Was it called Gravity?
Oh, he wasn't he? Yeah.
The astronaut movie a few years ago, which was a voice-only performance, I think.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that completely.
Andrew Bullock and George Clooney as the astronauts, and you never actually see Mission Control, but it is nevertheless him as Mission Control at NASA. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway.
I think we've done some good recommendations accidentally there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Haven't we out our question of the week? Doesn't that relate to this?
It does, yes. Should we move on to that?
Oh, yeah, if you like.
Yeah.
I think we could talk about Snowpiercer all day. There's still plenty more to say about Snowpiercer.
Yeah.
We could talk about Snowpiercer all day, but that would mean Aidan edits this all week.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Yes, our question of the week was Snowpiercer themed. It was simply, what is the best vehicle in a movie? A lot of answers to this. Paul Boston says, for any country lane face-off, I recommend the Jawa Sandcrawler.
I was pondering over what is the best Star Wars kind of machine like that. I mean, I ended up concluding I thought probably the giant, the Imperial Walkers from The Empire Strikes Back were kind of the pick of them, really, as sort of big robot elephant kind of things. But the Jawa Sandcrawler was on the list as well.
The Asats are fabulous, actually. Even I, a Star Wars skeptic, have to admit that.
Yeah, they're my nephew's favourite character, the Asats.
Mikey Toes says, again on Star Wars theme, does the Millennium Falcon count? It absolutely does. Yes, it's a vehicle. If not the Batmobile. Giles Lewis says, the Nostromo, perhaps.
That's pretty good. That's kind of like, that's the thing with spaceships. At what point do you say, does it count as a vehicle? I mean, it's kind of a setting, isn't it? They're stuck inside it for the whole movie.
I think that's kind of what I like about films like that. The line between a vehicle and a setting is blurred, interestingly.
I suppose you're right. There are loads of great movies set on ships. I mean, I was going to say the Nautilus from the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yeah,
as one option, and plenty of other cool ships as well. I mean, the Belafonte from The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou.
Oh yes. Oliver Lewis says the SS Molly Aida from Fitzcarraldo had to put up with a lot, that boat.
Yeah.
There's a brief argument in the comments beneath that as to whether the boat in Fitzcarraldo is actually the worst vehicle to be on, and it's decided that it is the worst to be on, but not because of any fault of the boat.
Leave the boat alone.
Well, you could say that as well. You could say the Titanic is a pretty good vehicle, really, in a way. I mean, it's still a good vehicle by most standards. You can't blame the Titanic.
God himself could not sink this vehicle. I I mean, that's another vehicle versus setting thing for me. This is where we met. We know.
Yes.
The iceberg doesn't count as a vehicle.
This
Yeah,
is where
that's
we
true.
met. We weirdly still go back there for date night sometimes. Sandra Hill says chitty chitty bang bang.
Oh, yeah, good answer.
Shout. Yeah.
Rob Simpson says Christine from John Carpenter's Christine.
Sort of the opposite of the no fault of the boat argument.
Oh, yeah, that is definitely fault of the car.
Yeah.
Christine is wonderful, I think, because it's John Carpenter sort of realizing that audiences were initially completely repulsed by all of that flesh ripping and morphing stuff from The Thing, but still wanting to do it anyway. So this has all of the practical effects morphing you see in The Thing, but it's a car, so it's fine. Ashley Lane says the most impressive vehicle in a certain uses of the word impressive is the invisible car from Die Another Day, because it made my brain shut down to protect itself from the idiocy. And finally, Hester Wells responds with just a picture of Danny DeVito's big duck-shaped car from Batman Returns.
I think she might have the winning entry there, to be honest. I think that is utterly superb. I mean, there was other stuff. The other ones I was going to put on my shortlist were the radioactive glowing flying car from Repo Man.
Oh yeah,
which has a radioactive alien corpse in the back that incinerates people.
Yes, that's great. We have very few cars in this, interestingly enough, and I couldn't really correct that. I can think of lots of great movies about cars, but actual great movie cars? Not sure.
I felt sure that someone was going to say my choice, which is, for me, the definitive one. It's the Doofwagon, which is the morale machine of Immortan Joe's militia party in Mad Max Fury Road. It's the one that has the great big speakers on the front and the guy wearing a mask made of his dead mother's face who somehow relays the orders of Immortan Joe to people through sound. It's just a giant hype wagon.
Oh, is that what that wagon's called? Right.
The Doofwagon, yeah. The guy on the front's called the Doof Warrior as well.
I probably would have named that as one of the options had I known what it was actually called. The war rig from Mad Max Fury Road is pretty good as well. So are all the other crazy cars.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different Batmobiles, actually. I was going to say my nomination would probably be the motorbike, which is called the Bat Pod.
Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Which is it's like a motorbike with giant thick wheels, and it sort of rotates around while it drives along or something.
Yeah. That's one of the great, being in a cinema, despite seeing that bike in all the trailers and all the posters, not clocking that it was going to pop out of the Batmobile. Yeah. And then when it happened, oh, cool.
Although it does I did think the Batpod was an almost hilariously stupid name for it. It does lead to Michael Caine in the film saying, "Shall I bring out the Batpod?" So,
I thought we got rid of that when Joel Schumacher left the franchise.
Yeah. So he's actually and it's kind of like if you're trying to think of a parody of Batman, having the butler say, "Shall I bring out the Batpod?" is near enough as silly a parody as you could get, and that's in the actual film. But
they're not great at the naming in there. They just call the Batmobile the Tumbler throughout, and then that's the Batpod, and then when he has an actual jet, a spaceship thing, and the third one, it's just the Bat. It's like why something after it? That's not how this works, Christopher Nolan.
Why is the Tumbler not called the Bat Tumbler?
Reasons. I don't know. I'm just trying to wave it away with some hand simmer.
I mean, that's that was always the subtext to those movies is basically how great it is to use military technology in civilian law enforcement. That's the point of it. Really, it's to help arms manufacturers sell things.
There is a lot more of that. Yeah, it's in the
just drive big military jeeps at mentally ill people. Yeah.
That'll learn them. There's the one in the Matt Reeves film that Robert Pattinson's going to be driving around does actually look like a car. It's the first Batmobile in a while that looks like a car. But but while we're on Batman, no, you're not getting better than the duck car from Batman Returns.
I beamed when I saw that picture. I was so happy to be reminded of it.
Yeah, no words were needed.
The only thing, one question that came up out of this and discussing this with people was trying to come up with a notable or iconic bicycles in film as opposed to motorbikes. Are there any notable bicycles? And are there any notable, even bicycle-related scenes, really? And I struggle to think of any.
Well, there's the Tour de France in Belleville Rendezvous. There's
the final scene of After Christmas where they're having to pedal the bike down the thing and wrap it up while they're riding it.
E.T.
Oh, yeah, I suppose E.T., although whether you could say the bike itself was the notable feature, I don't know, maybe not.
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I mean, all of these are notable bicycle scenes, although I don't know how exciting the bikes themselves are because I am not a bike guy.
Yeah. Oh, another few on my list for the favourite vehicles are all the crazy semi-futuristic vehicles in Miyazaki films, in Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind, and Laputa Castle in the Sky, and those kind of ones, where there are various mad airships and tanks and that kind of thing.
Oh, nice, yeah.
Howl's Moving Castle, vehicle or setting.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Howl's Moving Castle is the ultimate vehicle or setting question, yeah. Producer Rob has put a few answers in. The RV in Spaceballs. The Corellian Corvette is his choice for best Star Wars vehicle, by the way.
What's the Corellian Corvette? Which one is that?
It's a Star Wars thing.
Fine, okay.
And he says, since I can't have Airwolf since it's a TV series, Blue Thunder, the Gunstar from The Last Starfighter, Jackie Chan's car in Cannonball Run, or his Mitsubishi in Armour of God. These are his picks. Do you know what mine is?
Go on.
I really like Ecto 1.
Hey.
You see, someone was going to name that. Yeah, that is a pretty good pick, isn't it? I suppose. Yeah.
I think I love Ecto 1 because I just remember being a kid and being fascinated by how sort of top-heavy and gadget-ridden and clumpy it is. It's for the part of you that watches that episode of The Simpsons as a kid and can't work out why Homer's car is bad.
Yeah. There's plenty of other 80s answers. You could name the DeLorean, obviously, from Back to the Future, or even the special time-traveling train from the end of Back to the Future 3.
I'm quite shocked that the DeLorean wasn't mentioned because that's a movie car that is so beloved that the original joke doesn't work. The joke is that the DeLorean is a horrible, impractical car that no one would possibly want to ride unless it had this amazing special feature. But it's just the DeLorean.
It's completely defeated that element. It's totally outlasted the actual type of car.
Yes.
I mean, to be fair, even with the bells and whistles, it's still that everywhere it goes, it breaks down.
Yes.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah,
that's a fair point.
This is Lizzie Boyle and Connor Boyle of Disconnected Press, and you're listening to The Geek Show.
So if you're enjoying what you're hearing and you want to help us produce more, you can help us in the old metrics by giving us a like, a good rating and a review on wherever you find your podcasts. It sounds simple, but it really does help. Or if you want to go a little further, you can donate to our Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Geek Show, where we will soon have exclusive episodes for Patreon donors. We're on Facebook, just search for The Geek Show, and on Twitter at TGS_The Geek Show.
Perplexed by the pompous, ponderous piffle purveyed by normal art critics? Well, you've come to the right place, because we're not normal. We take a not-so-serious look at the serious worlds of art and literature. Join Sarah, Andrew, Rob and Graham for a piffle-free journey through the cultural landscape of the 21st century. Literary loitering, because you can't make a cultural omelette without smashing a few eggheads.
If you do go to our website, you can find Rob Simpson's review of Kwaidan, the legendary Japanese anthology horror film from the 60s, which we reviewed a couple of years back on the podcast, but is now being reissued on Blu-ray. But for now, we're continuing our Bong Joon-Ho special, and it's you first up, right, Tim?
It is me first up, yeah. I was going to look at Bong Joon-Ho's monster movie from 2006, which is called The Host. Which actually in Korean is called Goemul, which means monster in Korean. So it's really just called Monster. In we get it in the UK, we get it under this slightly euphemistic title of The Host. But it is
I like the directness of that. Just monster.
Yeah, although The Host does work quite well as a title And pretty much directly refers to the same thing anyway. Yeah, I think you could even get away with an exclamation mark on the end. Monster!
Yeah.
So you have to shout it at people. But the plot of this movie, it's pretty straightforward to explain, really, which is a sort of giant carnivorous newt type thing comes out of a polluted river and starts just causing havoc. And that's the plot of the movie, near enough. It eats people. As we talked about earlier, it's a pretty violent movie because this creature goes around smacking people with its tail, and it kidnaps people, and it also seems to kind of spread disease, hence the host, which they regard it as the thing causing this mysterious disease to spread around. And it's pretty obviously, to start with, it's like an allegory about pollution. The first scene of the movie, the very first one, kind of before the plot even starts, is somebody pouring a big bottle of formaldehyde down the sink.
Yeah.
And you see somebody doing that, and then later on a huge monster turns up, which kind of makes sense to me, really, as much of a justification as you need.
Yes.
But there's obviously a kind of pollution theme or environmental theme a bit, because you see, the first time you see the monster is you see it kind of swimming around in the river, and then people start pelting it with litter and plastic cups just by throwing them into the river. And this kind of provokes it, and really, it seems to me that it's quite kind of justified in the appallingly antisocial way it then behaves. Yeah. But this is this monster in the middle of the movie, which has this kind of the slightly remarkable characteristic being that there's really no element of kind of mystery to it at all. The monster is a really good bit of CGI, and it comes straight into view, right, pretty much at the start of the movie, about 10 or 15 minutes in. And it's, I don't know, you guys have seen this, right?
Yes, yeah.
The monster just pretty much emerges into broad daylight right at the start of the movie and starts kind of hitting people and biting them.
It's quite matter of fact that way, yes.
Yeah. And you see it straight away, and it more or less appears continually throughout the movie. And it's kind of the tone of the movie sort of depends somewhat on a pretty kind of fluid mix of kind of slapstick laughs you get off this, and also thrills and really, really horrible things happening, some proper bits of horror. You get things like victims not noticing that this monster is approaching because they have their headphones in and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of a semi-funny, semi-horror sort of monster, which is it looks like a big kind of rubbery newt thing with a giant, like, 3-fold mouth on the front, but it's only got 2 legs. So it kind of, I don't know, just sort of dashes around, really, with a very long tail, which it hits people with.
Yes.
It's obviously, it's kind of the ancestor, obviously, that the big hippo things in Okja, which are the later and much friendlier version that seem to cause just about as much chaos anyway. And obviously that's what Bong Joon-Ho thinks is funny, and I'm inclined to agree, to be honest. I mean, it's in a kind of dark way, the monster in the host does kind of just devour people, and it also kind of like it bursts into a sort of caravan and mangles up everyone inside, so you just see blood dribbling out of all the doors. I was going to say, another aspect of this, by the way, that puzzled me a bit was that the cast list has old Dal Soo, who I think was in Old Boy, right? The actor is credited as the voice of the monster.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And I watched this movie, with English subtitles. Well, I can't understand Korean. And the monster sounded to me like it basically just makes growling and roaring noises and hasn't got what you'd call a voice.
Yeah, you still get, it's like when you get Frank Welker credited as dogs in all those animated movies, and there's amazing B-roll of him stood in a booth just barking.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you mentioned Frank Welker. I've got to give the fact they're always talking about on like the Simpsons commentaries about him is that he can vocally do a flock of geese. Not one goose, but just do the flock at the same time. But anyway, I don't know if this guy's a particularly notable kind of voice actor, but it kind of seemed to me there wasn't anything that amazing about the creature's voice exactly, or not so distinctive. And I wondered if there was anything maybe that was kind of more comprehensible in Korean, but doesn't come across in subs. But anyway. I don't know. Enough about the monster. I was going to say about the human characters. You got Song Kang-ho, who's been in Parasite since, was in Snowpiercer as well, and he's playing pretty much the main character in this, who's called Gang-doo, and who pretty much just a kind of lazy jerk, really, who sort of loafs around and works at like a snack bar and ignores his family that sort of serves people snack food near the river.
Yeah.
And it kind of follows him and his family, the movie, mostly, as they get pretty kind of badly punished, really, by this creature and their encounters with it. And I got to say, okay, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to surprise anyone here. I really like monster movies, and I really, really think this is great. I really love the host, and it's got some really quite unique kind of characteristics to it. And the first one of which is kind of that has this kind of slightly fairy tale sort of childish logic to the story, which you wouldn't kind of expect it to have based on knowing that it's just a kind of gory monster movie with a contemporary setting.
Yeah.
So the creature, as the way it behaves in this movie, is a kind of sort of dragon ogre sort of thing, really. Also, it actually behaves very much like a kind of fairy tale monster. It kidnaps children and eats them. And it actually kind of lives in a cave. Well, it lives in a sort of in the sewers. And it lives on a big pile of like bones and skulls. So and then the main characters of this movie are this family whose daughter gets abducted by the creature, and so they have to seek out its lair and slay it. And I thought that was quite an interesting kind of archetypal frame for the device, really. And they I don't know if it's kind of attempted a sort of postmodern comment at the same thing, but they attack the creature with guns. And it just doesn't work. And they quickly run out of ammo. And the creature in this movie that gets attacked with guns at certain points is just immune to guns. Guns don't work on it. So they eventually fight back against it using spears, burning torches, and a bow and arrow. Are pretty much the weapons that they have more success with. Right. But it's kind of it's got the sort of weird kind of dark lair that the creature has somewhere in the sewer, and it's not really clear how long the creature's been around for, how old it is, or where it came from, or how many people it's managed to kill. So I don't know. It's the kind of thing where I was thinking about that because obviously it seems like this could have been made as a pure sort of survival horror movie where the characters go down into the sewers and encounter the creature or get hunted by the creature and either get stuck or escape. But actually, it follows a lot the kind of background of what's going on in the city instead, and it's more like. I don't know. Do you think that's like Graham? I don't know if you have an opinion on whether that's like a thematic difference of whether it's that instead of kind of crossing over into the unknown of the wilderness and encountering this monster, it's kind of the other way around. The monster just comes back into our world, really.
Oh, that's a fair point. That's a kind of reversal, and it ties it back into that idea of the monster as something that has been created through modernity. Yeah.
Well, I guess it kind of works both ways because they do go into the monster's lair in it as well, and it's got this. So it's got a kind of black comedy tone a lot, which is the monster causes a lot of horrible deaths, and most of them kind of slapstick, like people being smacked, flying into the air, and then also the humans are laughably inept at their attempts to fight back against it. So quite often, a lot of the time in the movie, you see humans, foolishly antagonizing the monster and making it angrier.
Yes.
The one I love is where the guy lights the Molotov cocktail to throw at it, and then just drops the Molotov cocktail behind him instead of throwing it. And that happens in very dramatic slow motion, a complete screw up. From the kind of protagonists, from the main character's family, you have these two very competent characters who are Nam-Ju, who is this super cool, like Olympic level archer, and another character whose name I forget, who is Gangdu's teenage daughter, who is the one who gets kind of kidnapped by the monster. So she sort of has the damsel in distress role a bit. She kind of gets dumped in the monster's lair and manages to avoid getting eaten, at least to start with.
It's Duna Bai, isn't it, if memory serves?
Yeah, probably, yes. Yeah. I say she's a damsel in distress. I mean, she actually does probably a better off job kind of rescuing herself than her idiot family do in rescuing her. But
yes.
On the other hand, I say it's not straight up a comedy, which is some rather kind of sad stuff does happen. Characters do get killed off, and it's rather kind of a harsh movie for the characters in this family, the ones who do survive. I don't want to spoil it too much, but cool. It kind of has a bit of a sort of, insofar as it's got politics, it's got a kind of, vaguely kind of, I guess, anti-authoritarian sort of subtext to it. It's difficult to, I was trying to figure out what to call it. It's not like it's not like an institutional movie, because it has the government and the army and the cops and scientists are in it, sort of in the background continually, accomplishing nothing.
Yeah.
So it follows this family as just kind of, civilians who just have skin in the game, really. Remember those? Because I was made to recall those awful American Godzilla movies from last few years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know how many of those were. There was a couple of them anyway. And most of the characters in those movies basically spend all their time just tagging along with the army. They just kind of meet an army regiment and they get followed around, which is a pretty dull way of doing it.
Yeah.
And I sort of left thinking, well, in terms of the attitude you want a kind of monster movie to have, if you hear there's a giant monster on the loose, do you immediately need to spend like half the movie providing excuses for why the government hasn't just immediately dealt with it?
Yes.
And I'm sort of like, no, I don't think you do need to do that, to be honest. I think, if anything, I prefer to see that the soldiers and scientists end up being kind of nuisances, which is definitely what happens in The Host.
Yeah.
Because they conclude there's this virus, and then they capture Gangdu, and they strap him to a table, and to try and find the virus, they're going to drill into his head to find the source of the virus.
Yes.
And then they reveal that actually there is no virus. I mean, they're going to spoil it a bit here. This movie's been out for 15 years, for God's sake. They reveal there is no virus, and then they continue anyway, dispersing big clouds of meaningless chemical dust to supposedly kill the virus and kill the creature. And obviously it's going absolutely nowhere.
Well, at a certain point, if we're doing spoilers, it is, there's the thing with the scientists discussing that there is no virus and it's kind of a cover for the monster, which is in itself insane. Like, people can see the monster. It's a weird thing to, in the parlance of our times, have an invisible enemy to distract from a giant monster.
See, like I said about that kind of vaguely kind of slightly sort of fairy tale quality to it, of saying that the monster is this kind of blight on the city. So it's sort of like, well, there is kind of a plague, which maybe you can dissect people and inject them in order to fix it in some way. But in the logic of this movie, the only solution is for our heroes to go and slay the monster. And then when they kind of start doing that, it's very kind of anti-authority sort of counterculture themed imagery, which is that they more or less, it's like gets to the point of like teenagers in bandanas, they're fighting the monster in the street using sort of improvised weapons like pipe bombs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like I say, the guns really just don't work on it. People fire guns and it just has no effect. But there's obviously kind of a political subtext there as well. I mean, you could say it almost goes the other way, which is at one point the monster attacks a parade of protesters who are protesting about a political prisoner, which almost seems like mocking them in a way. But I got to say, shame to dump this in the middle, but the one fault maybe with the host is it's sort of slightly too long. I don't know if anyone else thought this. It's the full 2 hours. And it starts very, very sort of quickly. And there's not much I'd say I want to cut from it, but it's the kind of movie I expected to end sooner than it does, maybe just because the genre of a kind of monster movie you'd think would stop at 90 minutes or an hour 45. So it kind of seems like you're watching the host and expecting that you're seeing the main characters embarking on a sort of climactic monster hunt. But it's not, and there's still a whole other act of the movie to go, more or less. So it's maybe just that it's a bit kind of loosely edited. There's a few scenes that are allowed to go on too long, because there are a lot of scenes of the monster going on a rampage and wrecking the place. Yeah, so I don't know. The other thing about it was I wasn't quite sure about the ending. Again, I'd kind of be interested to hear your opinions. I mean, they do eventually kill this monster, and they kill it pretty nastily. They set it on fire, and then they stab it in the mouth with a spear.
Yeah.
Gang Do does that, yeah.
They work together to do it. That's nice. I think that's more what they're aiming towards.
It's kind of like
makes the dream work.
Yeah. They also, the main character just kind of acknowledges this instead of just being complacent, actually kind of, goes and does it himself. But the thing is, it was like, well, it seemed to me the movie has a pretty unambiguous environmental theme. And so the monster is kind of representing the pollution that was caused or the consequences of it in some way. Or is it like nature's revenge, for the environment having been damaged? And I felt like the monster, although it goes and kills an amazing number of people, I didn't feel like it really deserved to die. I thought it was a shame they could just have sort of driven it back into the sea or something. But
I thought it was the hero. That is the title of the movie after all. It's Monster. Go on, Monster. Get him.
Yeah. Or the family could just have rescued them each other and escaped. I don't know. So killing the creature seemed very slightly harsh to me. And from that point of view, the real villain of the movie is the guy at the start who pours 50 bottles of formaldehyde down the drain.
Yes,
he's the source of the trouble, really. But he doesn't get punished at all. So I don't know. It's partly just finding the monster strangely sympathetic some of the time, and it's quite a kind of characterful monster in that people throw bits of concrete at it and stuff, and it does get really pissed off by that and kind of sort of fights back. So yeah, I mean, it's a pretty great kind of monster movie. It's also sort of an environmental disaster movie. That's the thing that seems distinctive about it, really. It kind of shows all the consequences of this monster being a environmental disaster for the city and kind of, wrecking up the environment and crowds and stuff like that being harassed and tormented by it. I mean, overall, yeah, basically you'd say that's the host. It is a excellent kind of grim satire and social commentary on how poorly our society copes with a huge carnivorous newt. Yeah, pretty much.
Take it on the poster.
Although, I mean, it's also, you've got to say at the moment, a matter of opinion, because the movie is absolutely chock full of the imagery of like infection, virus epidemics, respiratory disorders. It's got large scale like quarantine lockdowns and stuff happening in it. So I think ideal viewing at the moment, really, but
yeah,
your mileage may vary.
Yes. Well, I have decided to return to what I've always cited as my favourite Joon-Ho Bong movie, and I was curious as to whether it would still be my favourite after Parasite. But this is following on from your review of his first monster movie. This is his Godzilla franchise entry, Mothra. No, sorry, I've misread that one.
Yes.
Mother.
This is one where you can't add the exclamation mark or everything gets a bit Aronofsky.
Yeah. Although I would still be interested in seeing Darren Aronofsky's Mothra exclamation mark. But no, this is the movie that he made straight after The Host. It was seen as a return to the terrain of his, not his debut, his second film, but the one that broke him through, really, Memories of Murder, which was more of a kind of grounded true crime film with a streak of black comedy. I have to say, one of the pleasures of seeing him both do English language films and then go back home and make something that's bigger than everything he's ever done is people stop putting things in these silly categories where people say, The Host's one of his blockbuster ones, but Mother's one of his personal ones. And thank God we're not doing that still, because they are all personal ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the story of Kim Ji-ha, who plays an unnamed widow who's extremely protective of her son, Yoon Do-jeon, who has a sort of unspecified mental handicap. He finds it very difficult to process new memories, which makes him incredibly suggestible. If you tell him that an event went a certain way, he will instinctively believe it and will figure out that it didn't much later, if at all, which makes him an uncomfortably good patsy for the killing of a local schoolgirl who he was seen following after and behaving slightly, I want to say unknowingly creepy towards, although you can debate on how much he should have understood of that situation. I think looking back on Mother, it's fascinating because now it appears not so much similar to Memories of Murder, but similar to Parasite, to the extent where I would say if you've seen Parasite and you were looking for a next step in Bong's filmography, this would be a pretty good choice. Because right from the start, it opens with this scene where the heroine is chopping some dried herbs for use in her apothecary. She runs a store selling traditional folk remedies and does a bit of acupuncture on the side, although she doesn't have a license for that. And she's chopping herbs in this frankly alarming looking kind of bacon slicer thing. And as she gets right up to the sort of end of the bunch, she is distracted by something going on across the road, where she sees her son playing with a dog, following it out into the road and then getting clipped by a car. A car which is clearly being driven by a much richer person than them. So straight away, you've got all the ingredients of Parasite. You've got the ratcheting tension. You've got the class conflict. You've got the really quite grotty interiors. It's all there. And Yoon Do-jeon, her son, goes with his friend Jin-tae, a local kind of tough guy who he hangs around with for protection, and follows the Mercedes that has clipped him to this local golf course. And there is this fantastic scene, which is all the better for the fact that it doesn't come across as a virtuoso camera move. But nevertheless, when they get to that golf course and start setting about the car that clipped Yoon Do-jeon, just watch and see how many different shots it gets through without cutting. It is this remarkable but very subtle, it appears to be a crane shot, which gets through so much of the scene in one take without ever feeling like you're watching a big show-offy Steadicam shot. And I think the purpose of this, and what I love about it, is that Bong Joon-ho's camera work is essentially similar to a novelist's prose. It doesn't get in the way, but it gives you a sense of the kind of tone and the flavour and the humour of what you're watching. And it reminds me so much of Roger Deakins' work for the Coen brothers, Bong Joon-ho does seem to share the Coen brothers' disdain for over-the-shoulder shots. He prefers to shoot conversations big and head-on in a way that makes it possible to edit very rapidly between them in a way that creates a comedic rhythm. Mother also reminds me a lot of my favourite crime author, Patricia Highsmith, in that it takes these pathologies that ordinary people have but don't talk about and uses them as a motivation for a crime plot that is not really about the standard things that crime plots are about. It's not about money, it's not about revenge, it's about this kind of maternal relationship and the central character's belief that her son can do no wrong, facing this kind of forked path where she could trust the authorities, although, as we've discussed, that's often a bad move in a Bong Joon-ho film, or she could persuade herself that her son is incapable of such a hideous crime, which could lead her to becoming quite an unreliable narrator. I think one of the film's big assets is Kim Hee-ja's performance. She is a South Korean actress whose work is mostly on television. Part of the appeal of Mother for Korean audiences is that they are seeing someone who tends to play quite warm, sort of aspirational, maternal characters suddenly playing a very different, darker kind of mother. Her shows, I've never seen any of these, but I get the feeling you can get the register of them from the titles. She is the star of Country Diaries, What is Love, and my personal favourite, Roses and Bean Sprouts. I think even without that knowledge, it's a really extraordinary performance. And as I watched it, I remembered there were moments and shots, particularly the really strange, eerie final moment, that had never left me really since I saw it, which would be about 10 years ago now. And I think part of its strength is that it takes the central character's world seriously. For all it is a very funny film, like most of Bong Joon-ho's movies are, for all it is a very cynical film, again, like most of Bong Joon-ho's movies are. There is no condescending towards the fact that this central character is a kind of middle-aged working class woman who likes middle-aged working class woman things, like a coach trip with people of her own age group at one particularly unforgettable moment. And I think it allows that character and her interests and her outlook on life, and yes, a slight naivety about some of the aspects of modern life that have passed her by. It allows those to remain part of the picture and to corrupt the tone of a standard detective story while not exactly laughing at her. It's a really tricky balancing act, but watching it again, I was completely overtaken by it once more. I still think it just pips Parasite as my favourite Joon-ho Bong film, but I knew it was an extraordinary movie from the very first time I saw it, and watching it again, that verdict still completely holds true. And that's Mother.
I've just realised while you were reviewing it that this is another one I watched near Christmas, the one I think back to when I watched it. I promise I haven't just watched all of these between Christmas and New Year, but this was one of those ones that, yeah, again, just listening to, I haven't rewatched it for this, but just listening to you talk about it, just think about that ending again, it has stuck with me a decade later.
Yeah, it's really great. And yeah, just something about Christmas, it's the most Bong Joon-ho time of the year. So round us off, Mark.
Yeah. Okay. So this came after Snowpiercer. This was the next film that Bong Joon-ho made after that, and it's a Netflix production. Boom. So when it came out, while his previous film was made in the American studio system and not getting a release in certain territories, joyless snobs decided that this wasn't a real film because it was a Netflix film. So despite the overgrown babies who would boo a Netflix logo at the Cannes Film Festival, this is a really interesting film that you couldn't have probably got made in the American studio system. It's his first, I want to say it's his first English language film. No, it's after Snowpiercer. It's a second English language film. But interestingly, there's some Korean language stuff in there as well. And interestingly, there's a key plot point that relates to stuff that gets lost in translation. So this is co-written with John Ronson, and the film opens with Lucy Mirando of the Mirando Corporation, the newly minted CEO, deciding to rebrand her company, one of the most loved corporations in the world, with a new environmental scheme. This set in 2007. She decides that the company is going to pioneer a new super pig competition. They're going to have a breeding competition all around the world. There's 26 different specimens produced in different locations, using their own traditions to see which is more successful. And a decade later, one of them will be crowned the winner of a competition to see who's got the best and biggest pig. So these super pigs are what they say on the tin. They're larger. They are nominally a way of solving world hunger, and they are, once again, not to use her exact phrasing, flipping delicious. So we pick up. This came out in 2017. That's when we pick up in South Korea, where a young girl called Miha, her best friend is one of these super pigs, Okja. It's absolute massive piggo that she loves to bits. It's her best friend. In fact, so lovable, everybody literally wants to eat her up. But she doesn't know that yet. So as the competition comes to a close, Okja is deemed the biggest and best super pig. There's a ceremony where this ridiculous figure of a TV presenter turns up at a mountaintop farm. He's played by Jake Gyllenhaal, and announces that Okja is the winner of the competition, and Okja will now be taken for a parade, and then all hell breaks loose. Similarly, as Tim was saying, similarly to the host, there's an aspect here of monster movie stuff going on. It is just a gentler sort of film, though, all around. I would say it is, I use gentler reservedly because there is still violence and there is still harrowing stuff, especially when it gets into the second half. But for the first hour or so, it looks like an Amblin film made by and for maniacs, which is lovely because there's just absolutely, well, if not heartwarming first hour. It's pulse pounding, I would say, rather than heartwarming. It's you get so into it. There's a magical quality to it, a magical realism to the early scenes where Miha and Okja are playing around on the farm, like just swinging on vines, jumping off mountains, and playing in trees and things like that. And then when the suburban side of things come into it, and the more social satire and corporate satire come into it, you're like, oh yeah, it's a Bong Joon-Ho movie. It's him in a register that we've not yet seen before, but it does also, as I mentioned, like there's a theme going on there about things getting lost in translation. And so this kid has no comprehension that our best mate is being bred for slaughter all this time, and so a lot of the conflict that comes out of that is her, like, of her own, under her own steam, pursuing this corporation, the Mirando Corporation, that has taken away the pig and getting into all kinds of scrapes in the city, unwittingly wandering into an animal liberation front's sort of plans. That they're a bit kind of like the various groups of activists you see in Life of Brian in terms of their actual effectiveness. These lads, there's Paul Dano and Stephen Yeun, Lily Collins play these animal activists who have an interest in helping Miha on the surface of things, but then also have their own agenda going on, and that's where some of the differences in language come in. I think that this film kind of hinges on a really striking sequence shortly after Okja first arrives in the city, with Miha still in pursuit, where Okja finds her way into an underground mall. And there's kind of beautiful slow motion photography. It's remarkable that in the year 2017, when approximately every single film somehow used the rights to John Denver songs being suddenly available to use, it was mostly "Take Me Home, Country Roads" was in about 8 films released in 2017. But Annie's song is another one that popped up in multiple films, and it's never more memorably than it is here over this sequence of this absolute carnage that's captured through conventional slow motion photography, but then also just to show, kind of to put this in a time and place as compared to some of director Bong's other films. There's shots in there of someone with a selfie stick running away, just grinning her face off with this giant pig rampages behind her. And it's beautifully edited and put together.
I mean, they're not
Go on, sorry, go on.
I was going to explain to the listeners, it's sort of a pig. It's kind of a giant hippopotamus thing, really. It's sort of bigger than a hippopotamus.
It's got hippo. I mean, just generally very cuddly looking thing. Yeah,
elephant characteristics as well. Yes.
Yeah,
very lovable, except it weighs about 6 tons.
Yeah, it's no less lovable, more lovable even.
Right,
But it does lead to problems in terms of the industrial process, let's say, in the second hour of the film. I'm going on a lot about the first hour of the film because I don't want to get too much into spoilers, but it remains to say that Tilda Swinton and Jake Gyllenhaal give certifiably insane performances. I don't know if many other directors would have let them go as off the chain as they did here. Like Tilda Swinton comes straight off Snowpiercer. Like, I want to play twins. Like, okay, I'm assuming that's how it went. But she's playing the two the current CEO of the Miranda Corporation and the recently deposed one. So the Lucy, the one who launches this scheme, is very tween. Oh, we're going to make a pig, and it's going to be a lovely pig, and it's going to be flipping delicious. Whereas Nancy is much more in the mold of Minister Mason from Snowpiercer, much colder. Is kind of there at the altar of functional business like commerce and all this kind of thing.
Nancy is dressed, it has to be said, as Theresa May.
Yes, that's how it feels. I mean, so whenabouts in 2017 was it? Yeah, she would have been Prime Minister by then. That's probably where she got this one from. Yeah, there's probably a straight line. I can't wait to see Tilda Swinton's Boris Johnson. That would be spectacular.
Let's not rule anything out. I mean, in terms of casting Tilda Swinton as things.
Yeah, it's down to her and Matt Lucas, but I think she'll pip it in the audition. Yeah, so I think this is an extraordinary film. It is. It kind of, I think in the second hour, like it flows less smoothly than the first hour does, but the first hour it's tied up in that sense of magical realism, and you need that build up for the second hour to work as well as it does. I'm not going to get into, the specifics of it because I think people can and should watch it, because brilliantly in contrast to Snowpiercer, this was the thing of putting this on Netflix. The snobbery around Netflix producing it was ridiculous, because this being available to everyone with a Netflix account was objectively better than the Snowpiercer situation, where we're literally only just getting it now. So, and it is, as you were saying, Graham, it's not about classifying as a blockbuster or a personal film. This is, again, a personal film, and it's him operating, I think, on a scale of a special effects film that we've not seen him do before, and bossing it as he does everything. Just another of those neatly unclassifiable, there's something of everything in it films that he does so well.
Yes, so I think that wraps it up. The only thing that we need to do before next week's show is next week is a Directors Lottery week, which means we are diving back into our massive list of directors who we don't cover often enough. Although I think one of them might actually be Bong Joon-Ho, so if that comes up...
Well, on principle, we nevertheless have to do it. I mean, we just have to dive back in.
Yeah.
The integrity of the Directors Lottery system cannot be questioned in this time of crisis. So, yes, I will generate a number. It has come out with 64. Who is that? Oh, classy. That's Akira Kurosawa.
Wow, okay.
Whoa.
So, yeah, heavyweight. Could have any number of stuff there. Seven Samurai, Yojimbo, Sanjuro, Throne of Blood, Ran. It's a big open field. We could go for one of the less well-known crime films, Bad Sleep Well, Stray Dog, High and Low. It's a pretty open field, I would say. We will decide.
I'd definitely be up for Stray Dog. Stray Dog's great if I'm thinking of the right one. Yeah.
We will decide on what it is during the week. But until then, that's been your lot from Cinema Eclectica. I've been Graham.
I've been Mark.
And I've been Tim.
See you next week.